Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Mike Zeller. I'm the Assistant Director at the Shrewsbury Public Library, and I'm really pleased to see all of you here for this talk tonight. Just a little bit of housekeeping first. So this program is part of our grant-funded Radical Empathy programs, which are funded by an LSTA grant managed by the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. So if you are interested in this program, you will likely be interested in a number of other similarly themed programs that we have being funded by that same grant. So definitely check our calendar. I think we have another one next week. Robert Ozzie is giving his talk, Ask a Muslim Anything. Well, I shouldn't say talk, it's an interactive panel. And we've got some more coming up in the future, so definitely check our calendar. One other thing, tomorrow you will be receiving a survey about this program. If you can please fill that out, that's part of the grant funding. We have to do some assessment work, so it would really appreciate if you could take a run through that. It should only be 2 or 3 minutes to complete. Okay, so that's that, and I'll get on to introducing our speaker. So Adam Falkner is a poet, educator, and arts and culture strategist. He's the author of Adoption, winner of the 2017 Diode Editions Chapbook Award, and the Willies, Button Poetry 2020. And his work has appeared in a range of print and media spaces, including on programming for HBO, NBC, NPR, BET, in the New York Times, and elsewhere. So without further ado, I will turn things over to Adam. Adam, thank you for joining us tonight.
Mike, thank you. I appreciate you all. I appreciate Shrewsbury and the community that has shown up this evening. I want to invite folks into participating in this small but mighty group, in whatever way feels comfortable for you. It's always my preference to read for a little bit, to banter, but then certainly to have this be more of a dialogue and a conversation should you have questions or curiosities about the work. Or frankly, not the work. And by all means, the trusty and friendly chat feature that I don't know what I'm going to do without the chat when we are forced back into having to go places physically. But the chat feature is where the real party happens. There's the reading, there's the banter, but then there's also conversations we can ask in the chat and questions that can be dropped there. By all means, feel free to drop in the chat and say, hello, how are you doing? Good to see you. I have decided, as I was sort of sitting here chatting with Mike a bit about the last couple years, I've decided that I'm going to open tonight's set and discussion by singing a little bit. And the reason I have decided to do that is because I have had a very long day. And I know that I, like many of you, are not alone in that. And one of the things that calls me into the joy that is my work, one of the things that calls me into being present, which is sometimes hard when we're sitting in the same chairs that we were sitting in all day, and you're here now or on your same couch. So I'm going to sing a little bit, go into a poem that is a brand new baby, and then tell you a little bit about the Willies, the book that we are here to celebrate and talk a little bit about. Does that sound all right with y'all? Great. I just want to pray. I just want to praise. Oh, I just want to praise. There is air in my lungs. There is sun on my skin. And I'm grateful for this mood that I'm in. There is warmth in my life. There is blue in my sky. And I'm grateful for this soul that's mine. And I do not take enough time to praise. So I think I will tonight. I just want to pray. A lot of it. And I just want to praise the lot of you. I just want to pray. And so what if I'm not ready to leave yet? So what if I'm not ready to leave yet? So what if I like it in the house where it's warm, where my dog's paws smell of hot sleep and corn chips, and every day is sad, but it's the same? So what if I like the way we check on each other now, even if the forecast doesn't change? Box late and ticker tape and a stiff gin to remind the day to turn. I used to be bummed by all there was to want and how little there was in a day to go get it. How every day was a refresh, a menu of metrics to measure my worth with. Better light in an apartment, a better job, a boyfriend my friends love louder, a happier way to have your cake and eat it. But now, the life that could have been doesn't even make sense. I don't secretly want to be a pop star anymore, or a famous professor anymore, or a senator, or whatever, depending on the day my whiteness makes me think I can have. I'm working on it. Let's just say that I crave less, that I crave and starve for little more than the dust of a beloved single dangling earring against stubble mid-hug in a doorway. On a street corner, the wheeze and wet air of laughter in a corner booth, palms pounding the table in good story, a single slung arm around a neck. This is the 354th straight day I have closed my eyes and imagined this world. We do not return to the plod of zombie-like start times for meetings and efficient email follow-ups. The thirst for some almighty better fades like footprints in a rainstorm. What I'm saying to you now is that I call all of them every week. I am in love with all things suddenly small and tender. I'm saying I am thrown wide open at the hinge and raw. I am a wire scraped so far open, I could scream. All right. Thank you for being there and for being here and for being good with my singing into the space. Maybe you were, maybe you were cooking dinner, making yourself a snack, making a drink. Maybe you were feeding your pet and I started singing and you were like, wait, I didn't think that this was a concert. I thought this was a poetry reading. It is both of those things. And should you feel so moved, thank you, Mike. Should you still feel so moved, I welcome folks to jump in the chat like Mike is doing, like A is doing. I appreciate you. Thank you for your song, whether you're singing it or not tonight. So for the next little bit here, I'm going to read and chat with you all about this collection of mine called the Willies. But I should say before I do that, that poem that I just offered is obviously, right, a poem about the sort of pandemic moment, right? And how strange it feels to obviously be ready to be done with reading poems in my living room into a virtual screen. I want desperately to be in public, loving with people, you know, and hearing responses and teaching in person. But I also know that there's a part of me that is sort of like irreparably changed. And one of the ways in which I have changed is that I feel so much more, I feel such greater urgency to connect with the people that I love in my life and remind them that I love them all the time. I call them all weekly, right? A wire scraped so far open, I could scream. I just feel raw and open to the people in my life that I love. And I'm always of two minds about reading pandemic poems to welcome folks to a reading, because like, hey, you know, we're still in it, but it clarifies for me, you know, how much I love my folks and how much I'm sure you love your folks, your families, chosen, beloved, or biological. And it helps me understand the stories that I need to be telling in my life with greater clarity and greater urgency. And one of those stories is the sort of backbone or the back spine of the Willies, which is telling two stories simultaneously. The first is the story of, you know, my father's relationship to alcoholism and addiction and his subsequent recovery from those things. And the second is a story of my own sort of coming into queerhood and masculinity. And the Willies are really the sort of costumes that both he and I hid inside of on our respective journeys out into the world, right? His pursuit out of his own sort of addiction issues, and certainly my pursuit to be alive and healthy and queer and happy in the world. And so it's a book about costuming. It's a book about hiding from ourselves, but it's also a book about, you know, really calling ourselves in to tell the hardest and sharpest truths about our lives as a way of connecting with other people, and saving ourselves from shame, right? Thank you, A. I appreciate that. That's true. Virtual means more folks can be here and will continue to be able to be here when we drop it online. So I'm going to open with the opening poem in the book called Willie Boy. And it really sort of sets the table for the collection, sort of talking about these two narratives. Willie Boy. Finally, the poem I will not write. I am in 5th grade, wrestling in a brush pile of dead leaves with a now dead friend. We paw the hardening knots in each other's gym shorts and laugh and writhe until the pile is no longer a pile, but a kicked-in hive of tiny heaving lungs, soft stink and new sweat and rotting wood. 6 girlfriends and a dissertation later, I wake up in a tougher city with new friends who remind me of my father. I look at men with chiseled jaws on loud trains in new ways, or rather, old ways, but with less at stake. Wonder if they ever hovered their gaze over me for an instant too long, too. If the flexed tricep peeking from under my own black t-shirt makes them dance their eyes into pretend reading material too. I freeze snapshots of beautiful strangers, pin them in the high-ceilinged hallways inside me near the faces of everyone who knows me by a different town and a different version of my dad, none of which are of the Christmas he got loaded and started yelling about how gay people give him the willies, rooted in Sissy Boy, a name I've tried fighting and drinking and fucking away since 6th grade, a badge I've tried burying amidst the brass edges of ball fields and rap songs, and still, from beneath the goose down of this new bearded man, Soft snore into my shoulder's right teacup. Hairy thigh laid heavy across my lap. I peck the first lines of a poem I will not finish. Another Willie, another sissy. It raises its hand and draws a blank, swells its chest, but coughs soot. It curls its fists, slinks into the dark. Okay, so let's get one thing halfway straight. Actually, let's sing it. Let's get a one thing halfway straight. Better. Let's get a one thing halfway straight. Let's get a one thing halfway straight. I have spent my entire life trying on costumes because nobody told me I couldn't, and the stakes were never that high, which I have come to think is mostly what makes a white writer a white writer. The last time anyone referred to me by that name was exactly never, but that is also the point. I am a queer poet. I am a child of an addict. I am a masquerading white boy. My best friend died and it was sad. And these are the stories I water into bloom. Camp counselor, test sheet, choir boy, cipher rapper, scratch golfer, honor roll, pothead, point guard. And Whitman says very well, you contain multitudes. But Whitman was a white writer too. And the not so funny thing about proving you aren't something is that any story you tell that isn't the story is just survival, or more like a brick for laying until you are safe inside. The wall is high enough and you wake up and you say, whoops, my God, whose house is this? Who did I hurt to get here? And is it too late to call for help? A lot of this book is focusing on what I think that last line really tries to articulate, right? This question of who did I hurt to get here? And is it too late to call for help? And one of the questions that the book is wrestling with is, in order to pursue my own health and survival in the world, we inevitably cause harm to others. And I think maybe when we're not careful, right? And the cost of doing that is great, both psychically, physically, emotionally. So a lot of these poems are questions that mirror that last line. Who did I hurt to get here? And is it too late to call for help? And one of the more powerful and meaningful blurbs of support that came for this book was from a dear friend and colleague, Saeed Jones, who zeroed in on that exact line and offered, no, it's not too late to call for help. And that for me is what I hope radiates through all of these poems, whether your journey is more kindred to that of my father's, right? Or more of mine, whatever are your own Willies, whatever costumes you're hiding in to deceive yourself from a greater and more vital truth, is not too late to call yourself into your own humanity and tell the stories you need to tell to be fully you in the world. My father is a mansion made entirely of myths, each vaulted ceiling more elaborate than the last. My father is a trophy in a flock of empty frames. He is a fork in the most violent of rivers. He is a detective, a therapist, a sax player. He is a nobody, water walker, weaver whose mouth spills stories like moths, legend. He is both arms flown into the sky of a bomb blast, storm of 1,000 swallowed keys, candle in a cave without an entrance. His wine glass sloshes into his lap at red lights. He is an empty groove in a mattress, racket of a hard back Dickens thrown through drywall. He helps people fish inside themselves for the right lie. He is other women's names and locked cabinets, one eye cast over his shoulder for shrapnel. He is vomit on the carpet in every room of my childhood. He is the scholar of bomb blasts and both arms around me. He is made of myths and keys and red lights and other women. He is a pile of snipped strings and snot in a rehab waiting room, a hardback water walker. He is a fishing tail, an elaborate entrance. I'm going to bob and weave between the various stories about my own costuming and my father's costuming. And some of them, like the one I read previous to that last poem, are in sort of a young adult voice. And these pieces have actually served as sort of the springboard for a new collection, a new sort of novel in verse in the sort of YA or new adult literature arena. Joey from Dawson's Creek was my beard, which if you don't know means she was my monster truck, my main squeeze, my prom date, my rumor swatter. All I had to do was leave my locker ajar for her scotch taped image to yell to all of B Hall, there is nothing to see here after all, just Joey at the end of a dock. Just Joey in a field of daisies. Just Joey in Bobby makeup ads and stepping onto a red carpet. Obviously, that is the gayest thing ever, but let me get to the point, shall I? Joey wasn't real, except that she taught me how simple it was to hide in a look or a laugh, or to hold hands at the back of a bus and kiss in the smoky basements of parties and on the hoods of cars in stadium parking lots, or for how to say faggot, or for how to avoid the boys whose air I could feel come off them and toward me when they walked. Another way of saying this is, my God, I am so sorry because there were so many and I didn't even watch the show. Here's another one, same era. Pussy don't bite is what they keep taunting and laughing on the other side of the door. Jessie is older and in the good choir and sometimes jokes with my friends that she wants to be the one who fucks me first, which I always think is weird, but also flattering because she is the lead in the musical and I only have a small. So when she grabs my hand and walks me across the cast party to the bathroom, I'm sort of prepared for the worst or the best, or maybe an easy exit like, whoops, I'm too stoned, or whoops, this will ruin our friendship. But I just did not factor in the boys and that I would have to do it listening to them, listening to me from the other side of a single thin strip of light, and that passing through them lined up like a corridor outside would be the only way I would ever get to leave. Among the many costumes, other than the sort of handful that I've shared already about costuming in a sort of toxic, what we would now talk about as toxic. I think as a kid, I would have referred to myself or a younger version of myself or the speaker in these pieces who is adjacent to myself. Not necessarily as toxic insofar as they were surviving. And the easiest way for them to do that was to climb inside a skin and a language that allowed them to keep on keeping on, right? And another one of those costumes for me throughout my life has often also been about race and costuming in and out of different elements of cultural appropriation. So one of the ways in which costuming shows up in this book, the Willies, is through that particular lens. So I'm going to read a poem that there's a series in the collection that is essentially titled after different significant album drops in hip hop when I was a kid. So there is the year the Wu-Tang drops, right? And the kind of where I was at in my like white boy dumb. There's the word for the evening, SAT points, right? At a time in history when a particular record came out, right? Where I was at in my white boy dumb when the Blueprint came out, or by the time the Chronic came out again, for anybody out there who is, you know, steeped in hip hop culture in the 90s, you are my people, and you are who I'm looking for a lifeline of familiarity to here. But all you really need to know is that you know, the opposite of white privilege is not blackness. The opposite of white privilege is dismantling white privilege. But at the time, as a closeted queer kid in the Midwest, trying to do whatever I could to make me feel a little bit less alone and scared of the volatility around me, I did, right? And this is one of those costumes that sort of parades its way throughout the book. This poem is sort of the title track, if you will, of that collection, or of that series, and it's called The Whitest Thing. Owning your own white guilt is not cool yet. So you stuff the soft parts of other kids' cultures into your pockets until you believe that it is not there at all. You are a matching sweatsuit jukebox stocked with everything from Ice Cube to Outkast. Entire albums memorized and coiled in the damp of your throat. They are gunfire into the air above the school parking lot, and that is as black as you think possible. And pulling blunts the size of magic markers into your small lungs before school is black. Your dance routines are black. They call you Justin Timberlake. Your crossover is the blackest, though you are the only white boy on the court anyway. They call you Steve Kerr. You used to stare at a freckle on your right arm and imagine your entire body that color. How much easier it might actually be to be you if that were the case. And until someone tells you otherwise, that is black too. And it isn't that you don't know you're white, right? Less white is all you'd really like to be. You're sure there are good parts about having white skin, even if you cannot see them yet. No one asks you where you came from or how you got here, which is good because you probably could not answer anyhow. You just appear with an insatiable hunger to touch things that do not belong to you. A culture that fits like a bed sheet. No one calls you carpetbagger. Tells you that you cannot place your favorite things about Black people into a single bucket and try them on just to feel better about something until it is time to come inside for dinner. No one tells you that. So you do just that. You dip your toe in and out. You run when you must, but you stay when you choose. And that part is the whitest thing of all. Connor everywhere but, after Jericho Brown. Connor on the 4 train, sports page rolled into a drumstick. Connor stretched out shirtless on the front lawn, a football propped behind his head. Connor laughing against the red brick of a cafe, his head thrown to the sky like a sail snapped by the song of a quick wind. Connor in the Daily News, balcony mishap, 24 flights, faulty railing. Connor through the bottom of a pint glass. Connor through the crowd at West 4th, fistful of fence in each hand. Connor in the glint of a windshield. Connor hobbling on a kickstand crutch, swinging at stray frisbees, tree trunks. Connor on Channel 7, a good-hearted young man, filled with hope, always whistling. Connor drunk leaning toward a woman at the bar, whispering a smile of green lights across her face. Connor in black and white, frozen on a bookshelf. Tire gravel high note of a blues ballad, the scratch of stubble on another man. Connor collected cleanly into a shoebox. Connor in the search bar. Connor on G-Chat, invisible. Connor floating in the corner of a cooler, tucked behind the last Newcastle. Connor circling in a breeze above the Neversink, curling around the hemlocks, smoke in a dead room. Connor in a porcelain vase on a mantle. Connor in poems that have nothing to do with Connor. Connor sitting shotgun in the silent forerunner on the way to his own funeral, bare feet propped on the dash. Connor between eye rubs on the couch before dawn, flashing in and out like an old-time movie, shower water running in the next room. I'll read a couple more poems from the Willies, and then I'd like to read some new things if I can. Working on a new collection, and it's very much in conversation with some of these same themes, right? About intimacy and identity, family. But I also would love to, we got about 20 minutes left this evening. I'd love to sort of rev the engine on any questions or curiosities that folks might have, should you be interested in tossing one into the air. As I mentioned, it always feels good to be able to engage in conversation about the work or your work, or any wonderings you might have about these poems, what they're attempting to do, or questions about my sleeping terrier who is sitting on the couch right now looking at me, that have nothing to do with the poems. Anything, but some conversation in the space feels good. So if you have questions, feel free to come on off mute, say what's up, welcome yourself into the space, or just drop it in the chat, and we'll go from there. Mike, here's a question, and it's a good one. Mike's question is, you talk a lot about costumes, a concept that seems to involve identity, but be broader than that. Could you elaborate on that a bit? Yeah. I think the role that costuming, right, takes in this book, as I've mentioned, is contains multitudes, right? The two really critical ways that costuming shows up are ways that I am hiding from myself and from other people in a variety of different roles that I'm playing that don't really feel like me, right? The other subset of costumes that are sort of parading in and around this book are costumes that I think my father is in, hiding from himself, playing roles that allow him to not admit that he is struggling with addiction and dependency, and a family who is losing their faith in his capacity to heal, right? But I think the concept of costuming for me is important in my work because the narratives I just talked about are deeply personal for me, but I also think this notion of costuming is incredibly universal. A lot of the work that I do in the world, in addition to being an author and a professor, is I do a lot of work in the sort of equity and inclusion space. I do a lot of teaching and training around how to help folks set down their own varieties of costumes that they may be hiding in, as a way of, accessing harder conversations about themselves, their identities, their families, and in more increasing cases, their jobs, their board positions. And I think that is the sort of the pinching point for me, is that I think if we're able to more rigorously investigate the costumes that we are walking around in every sort of day that we live, I think that we will be more connected to the people that we are maybe inadvertently harming by not being ourselves, right? Because I think that's a huge learning piece of this book that I hope young readers in particular take away, is that when we are playing roles, as we all do, right? But when we are inadvertently or unknowingly playing roles as a way of like hiding from ourselves, it is inevitable that other people are caught in the shrapnel of that bomb blast, right? Or of our inability to be ourselves. So in as much as costuming is a tool for articulating these two stories in the book, it's also a much deeper invitation to readers to think about what costumes we all are trying on and moving in and around every day of our lives, and who we are maybe harming in that process, right? I also want to lift up the privilege of costuming, and that's a huge part of how some of the narratives in this book work their way into race and cultural appropriation, right? It is incredibly true that the ability to try on costumes as a way of figuring out who you are in the world is a luxury that is uniquely afforded to white cisgendered kids in this country, right? And a lot of students and friends and family and people that I love, that I call beloved, don't have those choices and write from different angles around the same idea. But that's worth lifting up too. Thank you, Mike, for the question, and I appreciate the curiosity. That's right, Priya. All the world's a stage, and all men and women merely players. This is true. Shakespeare, I believe, said that. Or Shakespeare's team of many women who wrote lots of his plays. I didn't say that. Someone else said that. It's just a rumor I heard. Will's a great guy. Hey, thank you for your question. Is your poetry your escape world, or just an expression of your feelings and interpretations around you? Such a good question. I think the answer to that question for me is yes. I know that, writing and pursuing art for me doesn't feel like an escape. It feels like a yes to both, right? I think it's yes to both. But I would say that I don't think writing for me is an escape in so much as it is a tool for me to try and better understand the world around me, right? Like the best way that I can explain it is sometimes when I'm like in the middle of writing a poem, or not even necessarily a poem, I'm working out a song or a ditty or something like that. I know that something I feel heavy when I'm in it, right? I feel like I'm working towards something, a better way of understanding my relationship to X, right? And when I get to that last line, the levity I often feel is as if I've just set a tremendous weight down. And right, I'm not always sure that I understood what I was trying to write toward, but it's like when I write about something, or when I choose to pick up a topic or an issue, I don't really sit down with the intention of knowing where I'm going. It's sort of just like waxing a stone, right? And I'm sort of figuring out in a dark room where the walls are. And then suddenly at some point, there's light in a corner, and I just keep following that particular light because it feels good. And when I'm done, or when I reach the last line, I feel like I've set something down that I didn't know I was holding. I don't know if that is an idea or sentiment that relates to anyone else out there, but like, I don't necessarily know what I'm holding until I give myself permission to set it down. There it is. And sometimes the writing process for me is a place where I give myself permission to wrestle with a lot of what I have a hard time speaking verbally into the world. You know, it is definitely a secure place for me. I would say writing actually is a more secure and comfortable place for me than my lived life, right? I feel more capable and confident writing like 10 steps ahead of my life than I feel like living, if that makes sense. People talk about writing their way into a better version of themselves or writing their way out of the closet, right? Like there are different courageous moments that I think even in the process of writing this book, I'm describing a younger version of the speaker who is sort of using writing as a way to process his world without even really admitting to himself that he's queer, right? Maybe I'll read a poem in the center of this collection. And it's just as sort of the central speaker in the text is still costuming for sure, but trying to make a choice about whether or not it feels like they need to set something down, to use that language again, right? And the poem is called Straight Poem. I'm gonna come back to that next question. I like it. When I say that he is a good-looking man, I mean that entirely objectively. As in, anyone who thinks otherwise might be so homophobic that they themselves are gay. And I am not gay, therefore I appreciate how certain people might be drawn to features that he holds. When I say that I find him handsome, again, I would like to clarify that statement. I think of him as beautiful in that girls love him sort of way. How, if I were a girl, I might wait outside his dressing room too. I might write him love letters too. However, I am not, so I won't, but I'm saying I get it. And even this, said aloud in this very room, a flag javelined deeper into the cocksure certainty of my own Budweiser. So straight that is, that I could say I think about his stubble against my neck without your thinking this poem is about to get gay as hell. That glorious scrape and push of dueling jawlines. How I spend my morning commute on the 2 train wondering how our college soccer hips might feel cutting into one another in a corner on the hood of a car in some hipster neighborhood I do not live in, where no one knows me outside the splintered park bench, these rolled up jeans and tired black t-shirt, this orange magic hour on the East River, hairy tattooed arm laid lazy around my neck like a hitching post, a giddy ribbon unraveling inside me each time he cups my face with his palms. So in many ways, that poem, right, in the life of the speaker here is like the journey that they go on is very much writing their way into saying something by the end of the poem that they weren't ready to say at the beginning of that poem, right? And I think that my relationship to writing and art is very kindred to that idea. I have a very powerful urge to set something down. I just don't know what it is yet until I start moving, or until I start singing, or until I start really wrestling with words, and usually right in the security and safety of my writing space, right? Are you still in that phase, writing better than living? Such a good question. I don't know that I write better than I live. I think I live pretty honestly and openly in the world. But I will say that writing for me, I think like the end zone has changed, right? Like the line has moved a little bit, right? Maybe for me as like an 18-year-old kid, right, who was closeted and wasn't quite sure what his queerness meant to him, maybe the line for me was like writing my way out of the closet, right? And that felt like a courageous and empowering thing at that time. Now, I think that my line has moved. It's certainly not, coming out through poetry anymore, but there are things about the world that we live in together that I think are dangerous lightning rods for me, that I feel safer to say in my poems than I often do in the world. And I don't think that will change. And I value that, right? What other art do I indulge? I am a music junkie, right? I'm a pop culture junkie. I love going to museums in my city. I live in New York. I really am sort of, I play the piano and I sing. And I'm often going to live concerts and music in the city when we are not living in the middle of a global pandemic. What age did I start writing? Priya, that's a good question. I got lucky in that I had a great teacher when I was in high school who saw what I was doing, who, true to form, in that poem that I read about whiteness and cultural appropriation, I was writing verses, I was writing lyrics, and a poetry teacher said, "You should submit those to me. I would like to give you a grade for them." And the idea of having the writing that I was doing for fun outside of class be submitted to a teacher for an academic evaluation, those were very separate worlds to me. And it was this particular teacher's name is Jeff Cass, who's a brilliant writer and poet and truly teacher of the year again and again and again in the state of Michigan. It was his encouragement that like what I was doing was enough to start thinking about myself as a writer in a very rigorous and serious way. And so by that math, I would say that I sort of started writing poetry when I was like 16, 17. And then it wasn't until I left the Midwest and started building a writing community and writing life in New York City, where I've lived for the last 15 years, maybe in my early 20s, when I started thinking, wow, this is a really viable and powerful craft for me. Maybe back to A's questions, right? Like it was clearly a space where I could speak more courageously about the world than I was ready to verbalize. And I knew that that was something that I would continue to wrestle with, right? If it's all right with y'all, I'm gonna read a couple brand new poems and then we'll get out of here because I know we're coming up on that 8 o'clock hour. All right, I'm gonna read 2 brand new ones and I hope that's all right. One I'll read in response to the Connor poem I just read because it's a brand new one. And the second one is about, well, we'll get there when we get there, right? This new collection I'm working on is a lot about still intimacy and queerness. Can't take me too far from that. But it's really reflecting on intimacy in this virtual and virtually dependent world that we have created for ourselves, right? And it's exploring how useful and deeply dangerous and violent the all-consuming, ever-present internet has become in our efforts to find ourselves and to find love. And that's all I will say. All right. The poem's called Swipe Right, Connor. Swipe right, Connor, with the too big laugh, birthday playful, frosting dotted nose. Swipe right, Connor, with the goofball grin, Connor with the chlorine bleach. Right on the Connor with glint in his blink, sunlight trapped in wet stone. Right on the too young Connor in the hoodie and the not quite Connor at the end of the dock, two-step frozen through a screen. Swipe right stylist with the buzzed blonde Connor, the doctor at the bar Connor with Connor in his quiet. Right on the smelled like him waiter with bad tats, the laughed like him playwright who hated his mom. Swipe right on third date bathroom coat Connor, the so close stumbler, the jumper from 12 feet. Swipe right ghost in plain sight. Swipe right, I almost tell him but can't. Who wants to be loved for being almost someone else? This morning, I bring him coffee at the piano, hunched in still dark. His fingers feel for music. I exhale a single open palm into his back. I listen for the right black keys to keep him in my hands. And then this last joint is really about, you know, really the title says it all. The title of this poem is Your Mother is in Your Comment Section. Everything about this new collection is trying to both, from a humorous and playful, but also deeply grave and pessimistic and scary space, try and think through what the internet is doing to us. It's called Your Mother is in Your Comment Section. Heather, I am. Yes, you can follow me at Adam Falkner. That's it's on Instagram. And that is usually the best way to get a hold of me, through the social universe. So your mother is in your comment section. Literally on Instagram. My mother is in my comment section on Instagram. The sky outside is a heckling loon and your mother is in your comment section. Black metal grasshoppers thwack at the air. Trails of soot stripe the sky behind them. Sirens. Cups mud cracked with coffee stack the sink and your mother is in your comment section. Your mother is in your comment section because you stopped answering. Masked, vaxxed, but tired of the group project. The dog ate your homework and piled up texts echo off the walls. The neon lava level is rising and the God boxes won't rest. Senators jiggle their cold cut neck folds and December isn't Decembering like a December should December. Swallows scream to come up for air, but there shouldn't be swallows this time of year and the bottle of whiskey watches you work. Winks its quirky cork eye like a long-limbed whisper from the corner. Deadly old dance, stalking your blood. Knew you before you even had a brain to pickle, like your mother, who is in your comment section now. With gun emojis, flare gun emojis to thumbs up beg how cute your terrier is. To yellow heart, plead how beautiful your friends are. To giggling, ghost wave, wink, how good you look tonight to be alive. Thank you all for spending some time with me this evening. And thank you, Priya, and thank you, Mike, for inviting my poems and my stories into your space. I think the absolute world of the work that libraries do and the role that they play in building healthy, strong, intact, courageous communities. The library was the very first place that I fell in love with music and fell in love with books. And often I wanted to read courageous books that felt a little scarier than I was ready to bring home. And I wanted to listen to courageous CDs and albums that felt a little scarier for me to bring home, given my family at the time. And I have, to this day, some of the most important memories I have coming into myself in the world were like huddled in a private aisle in the darkness of the Ann Arbor Public Library, looking at books that I knew I couldn't take home, but I knew that I had access to, and they were there for kids like me. And it's because the work of libraries that, you know, I am here and alive and healthy in the world. So it does mean an extra lot to be here with y'all tonight. And I'm really, really grateful to share these stories with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. You're so eloquent. Thank you for sharing your beautiful emotional poetry. I wish you could have been in person at our library and we could have enjoyed your performance more.
Next time.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for reminding us that we contain multitudes. I like that.
We absolutely do.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. This was really fantastic. It was, I think, exactly what folks needed tonight after the long day, as you said, we've all had.
Yeah, we've had long days, we've had long months, we've had long years. So wherever it is that you are tonight, do something kind for yourself. And if you'd like to reach out, you know, holler at me. I'm obviously accessible and can't wait to be in conversation with people. Heather, thanks for asking for the Instagram handle. If you want to find me on the internet, that is an easy thing to do. And of course, you know, go buy this beautiful book. I can't wait to be in your house.
All right, well, thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you again, Adam. We will hopefully see you all again soon at another program.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Right.